Sorry, I was stuck in working on a report and lost track of time. Let's call. Okay. First one is, let me share my screen. All right, first one is 4.7.2.1. This was submitted by James. James isn't here, so no need to recuse himself. So this proposed changes to the text. He didn't list the number here, but this is performance-based filter regulation. Optional as an incentive to use high efficiency filters that have been shown to be at least 100% more efficient than high rate sand filters at reducing cryptosporidium concentrated in peer-reviewed research publications. Aquatic facilities using a filter meeting this requirement will be at least 100% safer than standard aquatic venues, and therefore will be allowed to increase the maximum allowable turnover in 4.7.1.10 up to 20%, provided that all other MAC requirements are met. And then gives background information.
So how is this different from what we previously talked about for Hamburgie's performance-based filter stuff?
I
thought we agreed that those would be good spots for the annex for discussion and consideration, but not necessarily in the code.
And I think for some we did allow, we did approve some of the additional, was it the additional filter? We did approve some of the additional filter language that he had suggested. I'm trying to pull up the MAC right now to look at this section. If somebody wants to volunteer to be the MAC librarian while I'm doing this, that would be great.
Yeah, I could do that.
Looking at 4721. So 4721 is the filter section, and 4721 has just general, I'll pull it on screen, general information about what's required, certified, listed, labeled, approved media. So this does seem to be an appropriate spot for it. My concern would be with the language as written. I think, Joe, to your point, it's probably more, how it's written is more annex language.
Yeah, because these need to be used in conjunction with coagulants, correct?
Right.
And at lower flow rates. So it kind of is a little bit different than what's already prescribed in the MAC.
Right. Right. Yeah, I would not be in support of the CR as written. I think it's good information for the annex, especially in the maybe 47110 section, to you know, bolster any of the changes that get approved. But I don't know, to me, it doesn't seem like this is appropriate language for the actual MAC text.
Yeah, I think it needs.
Yeah, I agree with everything you just said there.
I think it needs some work, but I think for the annex, though, we have to take the last part of that out, right? Therefore, will be allowed an increase in the maximum turnover times by up to 20%. I don't think That can't go in the annex, but the content above can.
Correct. Yeah.
On that
Yeah.
word as an incentive, what's the incentive? If we're
Right.
taking that last part out.
Yeah, I'm not going to worry about the language because whoever ends up putting this in the annex could use the supporting documentation instead for the and reference the source materials. And but yeah, this section, aquatic facilities using a filter meeting this requirement will be at least 100% safer. It's kind of a loaded statement. I don't know that really say that. So in the notes, let me see, Corey is the facilitator for this one, and Corey's not here. But just for everyone's, just for everyone, in the notes, I am putting in whether it could be good for the annex, and then also for the ones that we're doing today, since we don't have a quorum, I'm going to put the we'll call it temperature of the TRC. However, the official vote result would be an abstain.
Yeah, I think it's about the only thing we can do today.
Yep.
Yep.
We have Sarah on the line as well now.
Hey, Sarah. Let's see. So we have 1, 2.
I don't think that makes a quorum though,
It does not. No.
but I'll contribute where I can.
Still happy to have you on there.
Well, thank you. I'm sitting in the airport waiting for my next flight, so kind of interesting.
All right. Another one from James. This is minimum sand filter depth. This is 47223. This is in the filter and backwashing rate section. Amending the text to for high rate granular media filters shall operate at no more than 15 gallons per minute per square foot when a minimum bed depth of 24 inches of media depth as measured from the top of the filter bed without flow to the top of the laterals, nozzles, or similar system retaining the media inside the filter is provided per manufacturer. And saying that change from 15 to 24 inches is based on scientific research. Does not provide the references to that research, though. I don't see any public comments for this one. And I can look real quick to see if there's any TSC comments. And I'm not seeing any. Okay. Any thoughts on this one?
I wish there would have been some research provided.
Yeah, I was just wondering how different is this from the norm, from manufacturer instructions? Do all the filters out there have a manufacturer instruction guide that say 15 inches?
Well, I'm wondering how, so what is the NSF 50? What is the NSF 50 based on? Is it based on a 15-inch bed depth, or is it based on a?
Miklos James has just joined, FYI.
Hey, James.
Hey, I didn't have anything on my calendar for today. I don't know what happened.
It initially got left off. We sent out emails late last night.
Oh, okay.
James, can you give us a little bit of background on the change from the 15 to 24 bed depth? Is that, do you know, does NSF 50, what is the NSF 50 standard based off of? Would this conflict with the NSF 50 standard?
Yeah, the NSF 50 doesn't have a bed depth requirement, so some of those filters only have about 9 or 10 inches. So even the 15 inches that it's at currently would not jive with NSF. I mean, you can have deeper filters, but the minimum by NSF is, I don't think there is a minimum.
Okay. Okay.
Across the industry, would this create a problem of facilities not having a filter big enough to accommodate 24 inches?
They can make these filters any depth they want. It's just a question of what does the engineer specify. So I mean, I've got a filter in my lab that's 40 inches deep. I mean, but it's not the standard one I would go down to the pool store and pick up for my backyard. But it's just a standard filter that they make.
Yeah, I'm trying to look for
I know James can't vote on this one, but with his presence here, do we have a quorum yet? I think there's 6 of us.
if he can't vote no. 1, 2, 6. We need 8 for a quorum. We're close.
But yeah, where there's nothing on the calendar, I just happened to be checking my email for something else and saw this. Otherwise, I'd have had no clue that there was a meeting.
Yeah, when we updated the meetings to 2 hours, this one somehow got left off. Dewey and I just realized it yesterday.
So what's the drawback to this? Is there one? Would there be pushback? I'm mostly concerned about what do the manufacturer's instructions say? Do they all say minimum of 15?
No, they don't. They don't have. There is no standard. That's the thing. I mean, some filters could have 50 inches, and some filters could have 9 inches. And as long as they pass NSF, there is no standard.
Yeah, it looks like at this time that the filters may be, the depth might be just kind of left up to the manufacturer.
Yeah, that's what we've always done. But what you do when you do that is you create a situation where, if you were adding coagulants and slowing down filters, they still don't have enough media to work. So I mean, at some point you have to, raise the bar. I mean, this is my CR. I would probably vote no on it, but hell, I would have probably voted no on the 15 too. But I mean, you got to raise the bar at some point. I mean, these filters aren't going to work with 24 unless you slow them down to add a coagulant. And unless those changes get made, they're never going to work. But I mean, this is just that one step, because people are going to be saying 10 years from now, well, all of our filters have 9 inches of media. They won't work with a coagulant. And it would be like, yeah, you're right. They won't. So, yeah, I don't
I
know.
don't see a real downside to this other than, you know, a little bit more cost in building. It's going to take up a little bit more space potentially, depending on the system, but I think that's pretty negligible, right? I think those pump rooms can certainly handle that 9-inch increase of of space. So I don't see a negative to it. I agree. At least it's a step in the right direction, but it's not. I don't think it has a significant impact. It just will change what the expectation is on every front.
Yeah, I think it's just kind of making it so that it would work at some point in the future. I mean, that's really all this is doing, is saying put in enough media now so that you can make it work down the road.
It's evolution.
And they can still I think this is the section where they still have options to design with less than 24 inches. I mean, they can still use in this section of the code, they can, if they use less than 24, there's a different set of requirements. Isn't that, has anybody got that pulled up?
I'm looking right now.
Yeah. Because this says you can operate at no more than 15 when you have 24 inches of media. You know, I think the other option is no more than 12 if you have less than 15 or something. So it's just trying to, make this so that it can eventually work, because there's really no benefit to 15 inches versus 12, but there would be a benefit to 24 versus 12. And that's what we're trying to do here, is just, get it to where someday it can work.
Yep.
But it sounds like we can't vote on it anyway. So what are we doing?
Yeah. No, good point. No more than 50.
Yeah, I think maybe this was a great one to accompany the previous ones about the high rate filters, the high efficiency filter.
Okay.
Because that kind of beautifully explains the 24 inches is needed when you're using, the slower rates with coagulant.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll put in the notes, could be good information for the annex.
James, just another follow-up question. So with the increase to 24, would we still keep the backwash rate at least 15, or would we need to up the backwash rate?
No, the backwash rate would be fine. It doesn't change with media depth, just with media size. And that's another shortcoming in the MAC, is it never specifies a media size. So
is it fair to say that the TRC appears to be supportive of the CR at the time of the review? Is anyone not in support?
I don't think I'm in support at this time.
Okay. I'm going to put TRC support was mixed of the review. I'm also going to make a note that this could be a topic to bring up for industry revolution. Idea revolution, not violent revolution.
yeah, a pool that works is a revolution in this country.
All right. Next one is 4722-311. Again, sand filter bed depth. So this changes, this goes along with the last one. In the next section down from what we just talked about, it would update when the bed depth is less than 15 inches, it just updates it to 24 inches. And keeps the same filtration rate. I'm going to say, going along with the last one, that it's mixed. And to add it for, to look at it to be added for the annex. Next one is water slide attendance. Joe, this is actually one that assigned to you. Do you want to go through it?
Is that 512 too?
It is.
All right, let me pull that one up real quick. All right. Yeah, so this particular CR addresses the lack of discussion in the MAC around dispatch operators for water slides. It proposes to add a subsection to what's already in existence for 512.2 that states that's titled Water Slide Supervision. So water slides shall be operated in accordance with ASTM's F2376 standard practice for classification, design, manufacture, construction, and operation of water slide systems. An attendant shall be stationed at the top of the slide who is responsible for the operation of the slide and dispatch procedures. A lifeguard shall be stationed at the bottom of the slide. When I look at that, there was one public comment from let me get his name correct here. Charles, where do I have that? Kunzman. He's with Northeast Ohio Consulting and Training Company.
Yep, Chuck. I know Chuck.
Yep, Chuck was in agreement with this particular change request. There was no TSC evaluation that I saw. And I'm actually quoted in the article.
I saw that.
in the notes there. I think there are
John Kelly playing the game here.
Yeah, exactly. So thanks, John. I see you're on the call. Thanks, buddy. I am fundamentally, I'm in agreement with the CR proposal, but I think it needs a little bit of work. And I do have a couple of questions, I guess, to bring to the group today. I guess first and foremost is, does this CR fall within the scope of the MAC? And when I say that, ASTM standards already address this, and in a number of states throughout the US, there are other jurisdictional authorities that regulate that. For example, in Pennsylvania, water slide dispatch and slide pieces are regulated by the Department of Agriculture. And I know that's the case in a number of states around the country. So I guess the question is it something that belongs in the MAC, or is this outside of the actual scope of the MAC? And should we leave that to the individual jurisdictions to decide? The other thing there is the way it's written currently, there's a little bit of a contradiction in the language where it potentially could place the manufacturer's guidelines currently in opposition to what this language, if it's accepted, would say, because it kind of says both. It says refer to ASTM, which puts that ownership on the manufacturer to provide the direction for that, and then the follow-up to that is, but the MAC is going to require somebody there. So it may in some cases be an additional requirement that maybe the manufacturers aren't putting in place. And I do know that there are some manufacturers and some slides out there that do not require a dispatch attendant. The other clarification that might be needed there, which is the way it's currently worded, leaves a little bit of interpretation. Where it says it shall be stationed at the top of the slide. In a lot of cases, there are multiple slides coming off of a particular tower, and those multiple slides can be operated by a single dispatch operator. This could potentially be interpreted the way it's written right now, that each slide would need an operator, which would be a significant impact operationally. Number one, in terms of finding enough staff to be able to do that. And then secondly, the cost of increasing your staff to go from one dispatcher for 3 slides to one dispatcher for each slide. So I think just a little bit more clarity might be necessary in that particular wording. And then there are some slides that do not require a dispatch operator at the top. The dispatch is controlled by the lifeguard at the bottom. If you think of some shotgun type slides, those drop slides, oftentimes they don't have a dispatch operator at the top of the slide, but they may control that by the lifeguard who's at the bottom of the slide. So I think there's a little bit of uncertainty there with some of the way that it's worded. Fundamentally, I agree that there probably should be what is technically defined as a water slide. That should have a dispatch operator, but maybe not one for each slide. And personally, I'm not sure that the way it's written right now, I don't know where like pool slides fall in that water slide systems category. I don't see that as being a definition that's in there. Pool slide is a separate definition, but I'm not sure if that would fall under ASTM. There would be some discrepancy there. I think we'd have to look at the definitions there just a little bit closer on the ASTM side to see, but pool slides generally do not have even a space for an operator or an attendant, right?
Yeah. Does it also,
I also want to make a note that what you said at the beginning there, Joe, about a little bit of redundancy. And the MAC already in 412, 2121, talking about water slides and landing pools. This is the engineer compliance section. It specifically references the ASTM F2376 procedures that discusses classification, design, manufacture, construction, and operation of water slide systems. So the MAC already does reference that one, but it's just found in a different section. It's in 412.2.
Correct, and I think that's okay there, but adding that there is a attendant required at the top of each slide, or at the top of the slide as it's worded, would be potentially.
And if that's what it says in the ATSM F2376 under the operations section,
it basically says that. It basically says that has to be provided by the manufacturer and that the operator has to follow the manufacturer's guidelines. It does not say that you necessarily have to have that person up there.
I don't know of any manufacturer currently of commercial water slides that I think we're talking about here that has like you'd have a landing space for like the entry, and you're on a typical water slide tower. I don't know any manufacturer currently that does not require an attendant, at least one attendant. Joe, do you?
No, I would agree that well, I shouldn't say that. I think there probably are, but they're probably the fringe element, not the main players.
Yeah.
But I do agree. I think that they almost always now require a dispatch operator at the top, but it could be one for multiple slides on a tower, and I think that's a little bit of a source of just cleaning up that language there, where it says at the top of the slide. It doesn't really specify whether you can have. I think it just leaves room for interpretation differently.
Yeah.
The way it's currently worded. Some people may interpret that each slide has to have a dispatch operator. Some may interpret it that as long as somebody's up there doing that, you can do multiple slides if the manufacturer allows it under ASTM. And again, I agree with the premise. I certainly would not operate an attraction like that without one myself.
Right.
So that is certainly our recommendation across the board. I just want to make sure we get the language correct so that it's not problematic should it be adopted.
Yeah, I think my, yeah, my, I would be unsupportive as well as it's currently written. Good information. And also I want to point out that in the Iowa, it looks like the Iowa code that he references, and is highlighted water slide attendance. It does specifically call out water slides that are in a very shallow water pool, so like a tot slide. Only requires an attendant in the landing area, whereas in the text here, it does not make that distinction. And so as it's written, I think you could argue that you need an attendant at the top and bottom of a tot slide too.
Yeah, it would be nice if the language didn't offer too much wiggle room for interpretation.
Right. Any other comments?
I would just say I agree with the discussion that we're having. There's a lot of wiggle room in the language as is, and we need to tighten that down so we know exactly what we're expecting, I think.
I think the other issue too is that attendant at the top of the slide is not always responsible for the operation of the slide. In the dispatch procedures, oftentimes there's a push button at the bottom that has to be cleared by the lifeguard at the bottom of the slide before dispatch can take place. So it's just another, I understand the premise. It's just another clarification that needs to be made so everything lines up.
Yep. All right. I marked that as abstain. We can't vote, but I put that the TRC was unsupportive of the CR as written at the time of the review. The TRC is supportive of the intent. However, updates would be needed. And Joe, if you want to expand on that, you're welcome to.
Okay.
Next one is U2. This is about bulkhead sightlines. 5.12.7. Do you want to discuss?
Yeah.
Hey,
sure.
and they're referencing me or my team in this one.
Love it. 5.12.7. Let me open that one up. Yeah, again, so as Miklos mentioned, I gotta find it in my notes. There it is. So there already is a section 5.12.7 that addresses bulkheads. The proposal was really to add a 0.3 to 5.12.7 that talks about entrapment. And it says, if the bulkhead does not extend to the bottom of the pool, all bulkhead parking positions shall be designed such that qualified lifeguards can see under 100% of the bulkhead from their station on the pool deck. I think this is, there was a comment from Charles again, who agreed with this particular CR. It's another CR where I'm in agreement with the premise, but I have a little bit of concern over the actual text. There are a couple of points in there that I think need to be discussed. Lifeguards being able to see 100% underneath of the bulkhead from their station. That's implying that a single lifeguard would have to be able to provide that 100% vision and would not allow for multiple lifeguards to be able to do that. I think that's problematic in some of the bigger pools where, you know, the lifeguard zone may not extend across the pool. So I think maybe that needs to be, that word there maybe needs to be changed a little bit to something along the lines of a combination of lifeguards being able to do that. It could be interpreted, I think, either way, the way that it's written right there.
Can we put the language back up there? The
Yep,
proposed rule?
trying to find it. There you go.
I do think that we need to be able to see the entirety of the area underneath the bulkhead, because that really falls back to the designation of the zones of protection, right? So it's already covered in section 6, where we talk about ensuring that the entirety of the attraction is covered, the venue is covered, when we're creating our zone of surveillance. We're already referencing that they have to be able to see the entirety of the pool, and that the zones have to be established to include the entirety of the pool. I think this does provide a little clarity on the bulkhead issue. The other thing that I think is becoming more and more common is the use of ancillary devices to provide surveillance. So I know our company has a camera monitoring system, and you know, it allows for us to place cameras and have lifeguards who have video monitors and a communication system set up to monitor areas that are difficult to see from the deck as an addition to the on-deck surveillance. So I think that limiting this to being able to see it from the pool deck is probably going to limit some of the ability and some of the evolution of surveillance, if you want to put it that way, where we can have multiple people watching the same zones and accomplishing certain things via having multiple sets of eyes on it, including the use of ancillary devices like cameras. So I think it's being able to see it from the pool deck, I think, is from their, you know, from their assigned position on the pool deck, that limits the ability for some of that new technology to be implemented. But I agree. I think that, you know, to be in compliance with the section 6, we would have to be able to see that anyways. I just think the wording here again needs tweaked just a hair.
Great.
And there was no TSC evaluation for this one either that I saw.
Okay.
Does the spirit of this one, is it also covered in the other bulkhead change request that was submitted that we talked about previously?
Yeah, I think it was, because I want to say that one talked about being able to see underneath the bulkhead.
Yeah, maybe we just need to pick the best one, or the most complete one, or the one that's most clear.
Trying to find that one.
If I remember, oh, did you find it, Mick?
Yeah,
if I
the
remember, it
warning
was about
strips
the,
one.
yep, the markings on the bulkhead.
Yeah, I thought it had some language about sightlines, but looks like it didn't. Just getting them confused. Okay. Yeah, no, it doesn't talk about it. What I was looking at the zones of patient surveillance in 63311.
Yep.
So
Let me ask you this: if
yeah.
this were included, it wouldn't take away from the other part in chapter 6 about making sure the 100% of the pool is visible, zones of surveillance. This would just be in addition to, right?
Yeah, and I actually I don't think I hear what you're saying, Joe. That this could be expanded upon to make it a little bit more, you know, specific and provide more guidance. But I honestly, I think as written, it kind of meets
Well,
the spirit of what we're looking for anyways, currently.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I just I don't like the on the pool deck because it's limiting some of the new technology that's out there that might be able to be used if we say from the pool deck.
Yeah,
As long as surveillance is being provided continuously and it's part of somebody's zone of surveillance. Even if that's via the use, you know, if you have somebody in a control room watching a monitor just to watch that, I think I would hate to, or some sort of sensors or something else that would allow for detection. I think that would be, I would hate to limit that, but I would be okay
Yeah.
with the rest of that if it was just, if we just struck from the pool deck.
I hear you. I'm actually okay with the pool deck language. And because from what I've seen with a lot of the video surveillance and AI technologies, that it's being billed as supplementary to lifeguard surveillance. So I think in most cases this doesn't contradict that. But I hear you, like if you had somebody just like sitting monitoring like one of the station was to monitor the, you know, underwater cameras that are in specific sections or whatever, that could.
I think it's also a hard thing to accomplish at times.
It could be depending on the design.
Yeah. Especially with some of the older attractions that are out there.
Yeah. That's why we had to do this whole analysis. That
Exactly.
is in there.
I mean, I love the premise. It definitely needs to be there.
Yeah, okay. Well, we can't vote on it anyways. Any other thoughts? All right. Give me 1 second here. I'm going to put that the TRC was in support of the CR with the, I don't know, intention or with the understanding that some language changes would need to occur, particularly the removal of the pool deck requirement. All right. This is another one from Joe, or Joe, you're the person on here. This is, why are you not pulling up? Facilities requiring qualified lifeguards.
What's
There
the
we go.
number on that one?
6321.
Sure. Let me pull up that and the TSC evaluation. All right. So 6321.
Go ahead.
Yep. So in essence, the CR is looking to add some language to the facilities that are required to have lifeguards. And the addition would be any aquatic facility that incorporates an underwater shelf would now be required to have lifeguards, where potentially in the past they were not required to have lifeguards. There was a public comment from Charles again. He did agree with that. The TSC evaluation. The technical assessment was that it was acceptable as submitted. And this came from the Lifeguard and Bather Supervision Ad Hoc Committee and the Ad Hoc Committee and the TSC for Lifeguard and Bather Supervision. The comments here were that the CMAHC Lifeguard and Bather Supervision TSC / Ad Hoc has recommended to remain neutral on this CR. The concern is focused on the drop off to deeper depth. Should there be a visual cue of the depth change ? Floors have inlets that can have bubbles to attract children on the shelf, period. Chase lounges added to the shelf ? Increased chance of alcohol use ? Are underwater benches included with this change? It says 6.3.2.1.2 requires lifeguards for unsupervised children. So this adjustment would only add guards to facilities with supervised children. When is parental supervision not good enough ? The underwater shelf is very commonly added to pools, and the majority are currently unguarded. They cite a 90% plus number for unguarded facilities that utilize these underwater shelves. The underwater shelf has taken the place of wading pools and oftentimes in new construction, as opposed to having separate wading pools. And then the other last question they asked was, is it an attraction building? Is it an attraction that is building a false sense of security ? The pros and cons. There would be a safety advantage to guarding, obviously, and the risk would exist, and the risk does exist with the depth change that takes place at the end of that shelf. The implementation, however, becomes hard. With a large number of these pools currently being unguarded, it may be viewed as revolutionary, requiring lifeguards at facilities that are currently not required to provide lifeguards. And then if you are required now to provide lifeguards, then you would have the responsibility to provide lifeguards that are in accordance with the zone of patron surveillance, which, you know, if you currently have a facility that's not required to have it, and now you have to add 4 or 5 lifeguards, that can be a significant financial burden. There's another question from the committee that said, should there be language added to make the transition of depth more clear? Add a visual change to the depth in some way, shape, or form, as opposed to adding the lifeguard requirement. But in general, the TSC did say that they were supportive of this, but they recommend to remain neutral on this CR. I agree with what the TSC said. It's going to require lifeguards at a lot more facilities, and it may require more than just one additional staff member there. It may be seen as revolutionary. The section on underwater shelves does not really speak to much regarding, let me pull that up. Where did I have?
Well, I was going to ask, where is the section under underwater shelves?
It is 4.5.18.
4518.
Yep.
Yep.
So it says underwater shelves immediately adjacent. Underwater shelves may be constructed immediately adjacent to water 3 feet 6 inches or shallower. So we're putting a restriction already on the depth of water next to an underwater shelf.
What's that number again?
4.5.18.1.
4518. Okay.
Yeah, it's not coming
In
up
the
when I,
word shelf into the MAC, and it said no hits.
Yeah,
it
it has to be
was-
underwater shelves.
Shelves.
I had
Okay.
that same problem when I was looking for
Yeah.
it earlier.
I had to go look in the table of contents.
Yeah, so did I.
Yeah.
We are asking for a slip resistant nosing to that underwater shelf currently that's color contrasting on the leading and vertical edge of both the top and horizontal edge and leading vertical edges. That is clearly visible from both the deck and from under the water. And then underwater shelves can have a maximum depth of 24 inches and depth markings being required in accordance with 4.5.19, and in addition to depth markings located on the deck as required by 4.5.19.
I think this is underwater shelves are kind of a new thing that they're starting to add. Right now they're outlawed in Utah. We don't add them, and we've given a couple of variances, and the both designers and public health folks are like, well, these are inherently dangerous because there is, I mean, little kids that are on those, yeah, there are markings, there are all of those things, but they disappear really fast and can be in deep water relatively quickly. So I like the idea of having, I like all the concerns that the TSC has added, but I like the idea of requiring lifeguards.
I'm certainly not opposed to that. I'm with you on that. I think that it's good. John also mentioned that 4.12.72 of the annex, the language is fairly consistent there. So let me pull that one up. 4.12.72.
Does the MAC currently talk about the maximum depth that a shelf can drop off into?
Yes,
Yeah,
that's
3.6.
3.6. Yeah, 3
Yeah.
3 feet 6 inches. Oh, and sorry, that 4.12.7 was from the previous CR. Sorry, John, I missed that.
Okay, yeah, I see it.
And I remember, I don't know specifically which one it was, but I do remember I remember seeing some study where a lot of the saves and issues with younger kids is in depths that are like 3 feet and shallower. So it all makes sense. I agree with the TSC that this is a pretty common practice in smaller health club type pools that do not currently, for many of their opening times, are required to have lifeguards. I see this as this is tough. I see this as revolutionary, but I see this as potentially a positive step for the industry. But revolutionary because it could have some pretty significant impacts with staffing.
Yep.
Are we worried about staffing or are we worried about safety, like public safety? Because this is a big
Both.
public safety theme.
Well,
And-
both. If
and
you can't
yeah.
staff, you can't be safe.
That's true. That's true. I get that, but I think, I don't know. It's on the border of revolutionary, but I think it's necessary. I mean, this is protecting public health.
I think we all understand the risk of the shelves. What does the data say? Are kids having near fatal drownings? Are kids drowning? Is this a real life problem? Or is this something that we are assuming is a problem?
I'll chime in on this one. We have no data. Health officials have largely been concerned about drowning risk, and there is some, depending on which official you ask, anecdotal concerns, but there's no hard data about drowning risk. CMAHC attempted to survey this earlier this year. However, we did not get enough facilities with sun shelves back to have a large enough sample. We only received feedback from 4 facilities.
Yeah, and I was just being devil's advocate there asking that question. I think it doesn't matter if we have data or not. I think we all agree that that's a real life risk. whether we have the evidence to show it. Maybe we're doing a good job so far preventing these things from happening, but
Or to that, maybe there's not enough underwater shelves to have that data, like Dewey said. Maybe it's just not common enough to have that data of drowning. But the more facilities that we build, the more we go. People are wanting these. They like them. So we get a lot of requests for these in our state, in Utah. And so far we've outlawed most of them. They have had a couple of variances that we have granted for them to have an underwater shelf. But I like the idea of lifeguarding because maybe we just don't have the data because there's not enough of them out there.
yeah, I like the idea too. It's scary. These are scary. How fast something could happen, especially if we're relying on parents.
And this is just like any place in a pool where it drops off to deeper water that's over any kid's head.
Yeah.
So I don't see a difference.
Yeah, that was
Just
part of the
same-
conversation. I'm sorry to interrupt, Terry, but this did come up on previous TRC conversations from previous versions, and I don't remember Dewey the exact speak about it, but you know, what's the difference between that underwater shelf and the deck where you can step off the deck into that? Now, granted, you're in the water, right? So it may be a little bit more difficult to see that transition. But if there's no parental supervision, then what is really the difference of stepping off the shelf versus stepping off the deck if we're not requiring lifeguards in all facilities?
Yeah.
I just remember that conversation. I'm not saying that's my view or that's accurate, but that was part of the conversation in previous years.
That's an interesting perspective on it.
I mean,
We
let's be
require-
clear. I think if it was up to any of us, we'd require lifeguards at all facilities, but
Yeah.
Correct.
that's just not that's just not the world we live in just yet. Sorry, Terry, I cut you
No,
off.
that's okay. We require rope with buoys anytime we have a transition into deep water, and this is the same thing.
Yeah, same concept. It just wouldn't be deep water though. This is anything 3 feet, 6 and under.
It's deep water for a short person.
Yeah. So I'm
looking at the requirements right now, what we want, where lifeguards are to be present. And we already request lifeguards if it has kids that are unsupervised under the age of 14.
right.
I'm assuming that's what we're worried about here.
Uh,
And
yeah.
Well,
also for any venues that are being newly constructed that have deep water, deeper than 5 feet.
I think though the supervision was part of the TSC's concern, right? So for the facility to be required to have lifeguards, they have to sponsor that. You don't even have to have a person come into the facility with you. It is over 14, right? So it's more, you can bring your kid and drop them off. And if you do that for whatever it is, lessons or whatever, they're not really quote unquote supervised. But in these situations, it's the parents laying on a lounge chair who are supervised when they come to the facility, but now they're on their lounge chair having a beer and playing on their cell phone and not watching the kid, and the kid drops off the edge. I think
Parents don't use their cell phones at the pool, Joe.
you're right. I'm sorry for saying that. That never happens.
I don't know what pools you've been to, Joe.
Yeah, I think that's more of the issue, right? Is there, I think, and that's what the TSC was kind of hinting at is, you know, at what point do the supervisors have the responsibility for that as opposed to the facilities, so to speak? You know, to Miklos's point, they all should be.
Yeah.
What's the reality of that, and how does a facility go from 0 guards now to, you know, potentially 4 or 5
Yeah.
guards to
Well,
be cover the pool appropriately?
I'm also thinking about facilities like think like your day club style facilities like in Vegas or kind of other areas where it's really adults only, And underwater shelves are super popular because, I mean, they're awesome, super attractive, makes the pool look great. So I think I like the CR. I like the intent. I would even be supportive of the intent. I think I would want some more language written in with some caveats for like situations where, or exceptions to the situation. I think when it comes to like a sports club pool or like a fitness pool that's typically unguarded, they want to do a shelf, and then now it's all of a sudden creating like this hazard. Totally get that. But I think there's other applications where it just doesn't make sense to require them to have well, it makes sense to require them to have a lifeguard, but like it's just not where our culture is at currently. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I guess the other side to that is, so with the underwater shelf definitions, right? Maximum depth of underwater shelf shall be maximum of 24 inches.
Right.
So if you have an underwater shelf that's only 12 inches deep or so, which a lot of them are because they're sunbathing decks, right? And then it drops into 24 inches. That's the same depth as the shelf, right? And it still meets the code. So now we're requiring, well, and I'm not opposed to it again, but now we're requiring a lifeguard just because there's a step off from a 12-inch sunning platform to a 24-inch pool, when
Right.
the shelving platform could be 24 inches deep itself and wouldn't require.
Yeah, at that point, it's almost like a big stair.
Yeah.
It's not, yeah. Okay, any other comments? We're gonna have to abstain from this one anyways, but I think this is a really good conversation around this. What I'd like to put in the notes here is I'm gonna say that the TRC support was mixed. There's support with language changes, support as written, and is it safe to say that there is anybody that is not in support? Or should I say TRC at the time was in support with language changes, or was in support?
I'm gonna have to say not in support as written.
Okay. I'm not in support as written either. Okay. Great. I think that's something that's going to continue to come up. So great discussion on it.
Yep.
Joe, 1020 rule.
All right, what number?
This is 63311.
63311.
And I am going to start putting I've got a timer going.
Sure.
So
6.311 without the parentheses.
the one with the parentheses, submitted by, here, I've got it up right now, submitted by June. Yeah.
Let me get in here with the TSC notes. All right, 63311 with that. The CR basically, and there are a couple of these, and I don't know if we want to kind of look at some of these together.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Okay. So I have them grouped on my end as, I don't know which one's which here. Hold on. I have
Is it the ones from Maria Bella?
It is, it's, I believe,
Let's, I think those are with more for zone evaluations. Is that correct?
yeah, let's keep those separate, but
Yeah, let's, I think we can probably look at those together.
Yeah, there's
Let's
two
keep
of those that are grouped together.
Yeah.
So, okay, so the gist of this is that the MAC currently speaks to the ability to get to someone who's in distress within a certain time frame, but does not address the need to be able to recognize in a timely manner to make that all kind of work together. The change would be to take the existing language that says qualified lifeguard is capable of viewing the entire area of the assigned zone of patron surveillance and add to that and is able to spot a bather in distress within 10 seconds. So that would be the add-on there, is adding that 10-second recognition component to it. There was a little bit of a conflict with the supporting information that was provided and the TSC's evaluation. So the supporting documentation here says that ARC and ENA both promote the concept of the 10-20 rule, where the lifeguards need to spot distress within 10 seconds and reach the person within 20 seconds for a total of 30 maximum. And they reference those manuals as part of the supporting document in the CR. They also reference ANSI APSP 1, section 18.4. And looking to put some harmonization between that, PHTA and IPSPC. The ANSI standard does address this in 18.4 by citing when lifeguards are required, chairs and stations shall be positioned to allow guards to meet the 10-20 rule. And then it defines the 10-20 rule as when a lifeguard or number of lifeguards trained and stationed in a manner that will permit them to identify an incident or trauma within 10 seconds of its initiation. Upon identification of the incident or trauma, the guard should be able to respond to and initiate indicated protocol appropriate for the circumstances within 20 additional seconds. So that's the ANSI language there. The TSC evaluation, let me see what they have to say. The TSC feels that it's not technically defensible. And this came from the Lifeguard Bather Supervision, TSC, as well as the ad hoc committee. The TSC does recommend the language be some language be added to the annex, but not to the code. Where when we get to their internal discussions, they felt that the CR was overly prescriptive. The prevailing standard in the industry has been to recognize and respond within 30 seconds. This is what is supported in the American Red Cross course, not the 10-20 as stated in the CR. So the TSC, and this was actually, I believe, was submitted by Chris Whipple, who is with the ARC, I believe. And so he is speaking to the fact that the 10-20, as stated in the CR, does not match the ARC lifeguard program.
I can confirm that too.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a big red flag for me. If
and
they cited that and it's not true.
Right. And you know, to be honest with you, in the ENA program, it was always about the 30-second response time as well, right? We use that 10 for some things in terms of establishing zones of protection and that, but it always was with the intention of that 30-second window, as opposed to necessarily putting that 10-second stopwatch to everything. There are a lot of variables that play into a lifeguard's ability to manage that zone of protection and consistently recognize that within that 10 seconds. The prevailing medical data shows that, you know, when we get to somebody in a true drowning scenario, when we get to them in that timely manner, and it's actually more than that 30-second window. I think the 30-second window is a little bit tighter of a window than what the medical data would support. But if we get to them within that prescribed time frame, we have positive outcomes for the most part in a true drowning scenario and not a medically induced thing. So I think that is important there to understand as well. It does provide a little harmonization with some of the other codes. I think the current language is good. It was intentionally left without a recognition piece to it because of the number of variables that are involved in that, as well as being able to monitor that consistently, right? When lifeguards are scanning, if they have to make a decision if someone needs help or not, they have to pause their scanning to be able to look at that person, which can take that 10-second window a little bit further, right? As well as enforcing rules and all the other things that are an essential part of preventative lifeguarding. I think it was deliberately left out of that because of some of those things there. It's probably a better discussion in the annex, and it also, to some degree, I think, puts a little bit of a challenge to regulators for being able to determine whether or not that is consistently being done throughout. So I think there's a little bit of a challenge there. And I know we've had these conversations before, and it was deliberately left out in previous conversations because some of that.
Hey, Joe, I just looked in 6311 in the annex, and it also kind of talks about some of those variables and
Correct.
the complexities of a zone of patron surveillance. So everything you just said is already found in our annex.
Correct.
And it doesn't mention anything about 10 seconds for recognition, but it does talk about the 20 seconds to get there.
Yeah, it wasn't and I can't remember the specifics off the top of my head. I have to go back and look. Didn't the British Life Saving Society, didn't they just come out with a study? It was more about scanning, but it does kind of speak to this, that trying to adopt a scanning pattern that would comply with like a 10-second recognition is not really worthwhile. That things end up being missed. That's
Yeah,
more
it becomes about a little bit to the size of the zones, right? So
right.
The zones not sized appropriately and evaluated appropriately,
Right.
then the zone is so big that the lifeguards have to move through it so quickly in an effort to cover the whole thing in that 10-second window that they lose track of the ability to actually see and process what they're looking at,
Right.
because they're moving so quickly to try to cover that whole zone within that 10 seconds. So it's really all kind of tied together, right? It goes back to the creation of the zones and making sure they're sized appropriately. More so than the stopwatch on the lifeguard there, right? And the intention always is that 30-second window of providing that initial, being able to reach that guest and start rendering aid.
Yeah.
I think that's a key component to it, and that's really what the focus needs to be.
So is anyone any other comments, or is anyone in support of this one? Okay, my notes for this is that this could be good information for the annex. Supporting documentation was not technically correct. And then TSC stated not technically defensible. And I'm going to say TRC was not in support of the CR at the time of review. We are officially abstaining, but that's just for notes, and you're welcome to put those in the report, Joe.
Sure, got it.
All right. This next one is going into zones. So, Joe, do you think we can pull up all of these, or?
I have them grouped in two different groupings. So let's do 48531 along with 6331102.
02. Okay. All right. So let's look at this one first.
So this is 48. Beginning of notes here.
531.
Yep, 48531. So in this particular CR, the question is, it comes back to to lifeguard placement and how we evaluate whether the placement is appropriate or not. The current language reads that the lifeguard's chair or stand placement. So it says the designer shall coordinate with the owner and/or an aquatic consultant to consider the impact bather surveillance zones for placement of chairs or stands designed to be permanently installed so as to provide an unobstructed view of bather surveillance zones. The request for addition to that would be adding the language that says testing shall be performed to ensure that the location and height of each lifeguard stand provides an angle of view that allows the lifeguard to evaluate arm and leg actions of patrons to determine if a patron is playing or requires rescue. From a supporting data perspective, there was a reference to an old NRPA codes and standards encyclopedia, I believe, for this one. And or maybe that was a different one. So it references the Red Cross manual there.
This is that's
Oh,
63311.
Or
Oh,
three.
sorry, hang on. There we go. Yeah.
Is this one- is this
There was
one-
no supporting documentation for
Oh,
this one.
Okay, sorry, no supporting documentation for this
yeah.
one.
Yeah,
So
in the MAC, it already says, it is intended that the designer should be working with an aquatic consultant, the owner
Correct.
or operator, to make sure that the location of the chairs and stands allows for clear line of sight.
Yeah.
yep,
So it's already in there that they need to be able to see everywhere.
Yeah, and from the design, yeah, this is in the design section, and when the facility is being designed at this stage, I don't know of what testing
correct.
that could be performed to determine this at this stage.
That is correct.
Yeah. So I mean, I think as written, it's a good idea. I think if we were able to come up with some evidence-backed angle recommendations, or
Yeah, that was part of the TSC's comments. The TSC said it was not technically defensible. The idea of angles was not defined. There was no information about how the angles would be tested. The discussion about seeing arms and legs is dated ideas of drowning and does not align with what signs of drowning are looking like with the advent of more video available for drowning incidents. There are numerous factors that go into determining the best surveillance, and that a single fixed position may not be the best location for lifeguards to be in. Does the sun or the glare change? Do the activities drive a change in guarding strategy? This seems like a step backwards in terms of drowning recognition. If the ideal angle can be identified for a swimmer in lane 1, how do you account for the ideal angle of other locations within the zone of coverage? The pros and or benefits of the CR and the thought process of the TSC for the CR has concerns with significant need for additional guards to maintain a defined angle of supervision. They did not feel that watching arm and leg movement was meeting the needs of current patron surveillance training. They were not in support of the CR.
any other comments from any of the TRC?
And then do you want me to jump right into 6331 because it's
It's kind of similar, but since it's two separate sections, let's
Okay.
I think just close this one out first. No other comments. So I'm putting in the notes, TRC is not in support at the time of the review. There's no test methods currently in place that would accomplish during the design phase. TSC was also not in support, not technically defensible. Right, is that what they listed?
Yep.
Cool, okay. Good ideas. I think it's just kind of the methods of how we would do that. We need some other ideas there. 63311. So this is the zone of patron surveillance section.
Yep. Let me get to that one. This is 02, right? Yep. So this change request basically puts that same language into this current section. So the current section reads, zone of patron surveillance when qualified lifeguards are used. The staffing plan shall include diagrammed zones of patron surveillance for each aquatic venue, such that they want to add to the list that's already there, an entry that reads, the qualified lifeguard is provided an angle of view throughout the entire zone of patron surveillance such that the lifeguard can evaluate arm and leg action of patrons to determine if a patron is playing or requires rescue. So basically the same language being added to the zone of patron surveillance in 6.3.3.1.1. Which
63311 already says, number one, capable of viewing the entire area of the assigned zone of patron surveillance.
correct.
Yeah, so it would just add this section part, that second part, such that the lifeguard can evaluate. Well,
It also
oh,
talks about that
and add
angle
the
of view.
angle. Yeah, yeah.
I think the angle of view is covered when we say the entire area, capable of viewing the entire area.
I agree with you. If anything, maybe that language can be improved upon, but I think that's the intention, right? Is that it's meeting all.
Yeah. I think what it sounds like what the intention is for the submitter is that I think what they're trying to speak to with evaluating of arm and leg action is that the lifeguard can see all areas, but then is also can see enough that they're able to actually evaluate what's going on, which is not specifically talked about in this section.
Correct. And that to the TSC, it's kind of the same comments, right, about not being technically defensible. They don't feel like arm and leg movement is necessarily what.
It's not really the crux of what we're trying to.
With the current
Yeah.
current lifeguard scanning training that's out there and what we're looking for, right? An unconscious person, a paralyzed person has no arm and leg movement. And then swimmers and guests who are in distress, they sometimes look pretty similar, especially at wave pool or other types. And then the angle definition and how you maintain a consistent angle throughout the entirety of the zone that gives you the right thing. I understand what she's saying by the angle, right? She's not necessarily wanting, I think, to define a particular set angle. I think she just wants to make sure that the guards can actually see, but I think that's already explained in there by being able to see the entirety of the zone of protection.
Agreed. I think if anything in the future, I would say we maybe need to look at how to qualify what is currently in the MAC on number one, that the lifeguard is capable of viewing the entire area. So each of the certification bodies has their, zone evaluation or zone validation test methods. But I think what they're trying to get at in this is to kind of qualify that number one, like what does it mean when you say you can view the entire area? But I don't think that this really is the right way to qualify that. Does that sounds like the PSCs and you're in agreement, Joe? Is that?
Yeah, they were not in favor of this one. They felt it was not technically defensible.
Okay.
They felt it needed to be improved to be accepted.
Our health inspectors got real quiet in this section. Any other comments? I'm going to put that the TRC was not in support at the time of review. Next one.
Want to do the other grouping there? So I have 4.1.2.3.11 and 6.3.3.1.1-01. They're kind of very similar.
Yep. Okay. Do you want to look at 4.1.2.3.1.1 first?
Yep.
Okay.
2, 3. Okay, so this one is looking at restricting the square footage size of a lifeguard's zone of patron surveillance. The submitter felt like most states have or have had a square footage requirement that was built into their codes. They feel as though the adoption of the MAC, sort of replacing state code, no longer limits the size of the zones by a square footage thing, which has resulted in lifeguards being assigned zones that are too large for them to be able to do what they need to do. And fatal drownings have resulted while lifeguards are on duty as a result. The suggested change is to add language that says each zone of patron surveillance shall not exceed 2,000 square feet of water surface area. And that would go into 4.1.2.3.11, which already says the layout for zone of patron surveillance is specified in 6331 shall be included and must show features for the design configurations that impact patron surveillance. This is the one where they cite an old book that NRPA put out, the Encyclopedia of Aquatic Codes and Standards, as their supporting documentation. I was not able to find that anywhere in a Google search, so I do not have a copy of that. I had a copy of it at one point in my life, but I have not seen that. So Miklos has it opened up here for us.
It's just the link, so it's not always obvious, but you can click on the link.
Got it.
Here it doesn't have the typical.
It doesn't let you
look.
do that when you download it. You have to do that right from the thing. Because I'm
Yeah.
trying to do that here in my download.
Yeah.
That didn't work there. There were let me see, were there comments on that one? That was this one?
And I have some comments on this as well.
Yeah, I'd be curious to see, you know, Joe, Dewey, what do you guys think? Are other organizations like the Red Cross, do they have a square footage limit?
They do not.
No.
Correct. The TRC, which is submitted by Chris Whipple, who is with the ARC, their evaluation stated that it's not technically defensible again. And that was the Lifeguard and Bather Supervision TSC, as well as the ad hoc committee that submitted that. They felt like the CR needed some improvement ahead of time. Their summary stated that Lifeguard and Bather the CMAHC Lifeguard and Bather Supervision TSC / ad hoc committees feel that the use of square footage does not provide a metric that enhances the safety of patrons at aquatic facilities. There was discussion that language from the 1990s used 2,000 square feet to match traditional municipal pools, but is not reflective of a variety of aquatic environments today. Using a prescriptive 2,000 square feet does not take into account the sightline of the lifeguard, the depth of the pool, additional features in the zone of surveillance, and additional factors. MAHC 6.3.3.1.1 already states the qualified lifeguard is able to reach the furthest extent of the assigned zone of patron surveillance within 20 seconds. And if this is validated at the facility, there would be no need or value to add this additional square footage requirement. There was some discussion about verifying and validating the zone being added to the annex to support the language in 63311. The pros and cons and benefits and deficits that they put forward were there was a concern that if a zone was under the 2,000 square feet, that operators might assume they could respond within 20 seconds and not validate the zone for their facility. And then assuming that all 2,000 square foot zones can be reached within 20 seconds, which is not reflective of this committee's experiences, they recommended a no vote on that CR. I tend to agree with that one. You know, the square footage thing is good in theory, but the existing standards that still have that, a lot of those are out of date and don't take into consideration some of the new attractions that were written previous to all the different types of venues that there are now. That square footage thing has been proven ineffective over time. We already addressed zone configuration in 5.6.1.2.1.1, where they talk about glare being assessed and eliminated, and in 63311, where they talk about diagram zones such that, among other things, they're able to see all parts of the zone and reach the extremes within 20 seconds. The annex does speak a little bit to creating zones and making sure that we have clear sight lines, and speaks a little bit to the number of stations that are required in 48531 of the annex. And then in 63311 of the annex, it speaks about effectively monitoring, is the language that's used in the annex. I think there were some things there that talk about there being too many variables to address the time to recognize piece. That plays into that as well. Purposefully, that square footage was not included in previous conversations, in previous TRC discussions from past versions of the MAC. And then I think that personally, I think we could look to expand some of that information in the annex, but I'm not sure that I'm in agreement with the CR as it's written.
Yeah, I usually don't chime in on this, but since there's no voting to be done today, because of lack of a quorum, I feel a little bit more flexibility to chat. My big concern is the unintended consequences, right? Once you start going to a square footage based platform or concept for staffing lifeguards, you wind up with facilities that'll go, oh, I'm 2,000 square feet or less. I can have only one lifeguard at all times. And then you wind up with a situation that we're all too familiar with, where you have one lifeguard on duty, regardless of the bather load and risk of the bathers, and you wind up with drowning deaths. So I get concerned about that unintended consequence, because facilities will want to do things as cheaply as they can. And we've all ran across more than one facility that if they can only have one lifeguard, they will.
That is correct.
Yeah.
And some of the current language that's referenced in existing code simply says one lifeguard for every 2,000 square feet. It doesn't tell you anything about where you have to position those lifeguards. So in theory, you could have a 30,000 square foot pool, and you could put 8 lifeguards in one corner of that pool and meet the definition of that standard. So you have to make sure that language is crafted correctly if you are going to add some square footage stuff in there. I understand the intention of some of those codes, but if you read them literally, they don't make any sense. They don't really address the need for doing what we're already covering in 63311.
Yeah. On the supporting material, this encyclopedia was kind of a big thing at its release. But it should be noted that the encyclopedia was released in the late 90s, I believe.
Yep.
Mid to late 90s, and is now at least 24 years old.
The rationale too was that the MAC is being adopted by lots of states. I'd love to hear more about that part of it.
Truth.
Who submitted this one?
Maria Bella.
Maria Bella.
Yeah. I agree with everything that was stated. There was a jurisdiction that actually kind of started pressing this 2,000 square foot rule in their jurisdictions this summer. That led to a lot of issues and a lot of variance requests. And yeah, as Joe stated, just the validating of zones. We've got much better procedures for validating zones than just relying on a 2,000 square foot.
Yeah. And to Miklos's, there. I think he's probably been involved in some of these as well.
I'm sure you have too. You probably know what I'm talking about.
They put a variance in there that if you could get a third party consultant that's on their list that would approve less than that 2,000 square foot, then you would be able to do it. And it just really didn't. It didn't. If you could do more than 2,000 square foot, they would allow the variance. But when I show up, typically I need more than the 2,000 square foot to actually make it work. So it wasn't very conducive to the variance, because if you actually do the validation, you need more than the every 2,000 square foot number.
Yeah, and some of the ones that we did, we found that, but then some of the ones that we did, we also, like how we were validating the variances was through the established procedures that we already have, not relying on this 2,000 square foot. So
Same.
yeah, so okay, I think we can move on. 63311 deals with the same square footage, but it adds this into the zone of patron surveillance list of criteria.
Yep.
Sounds like this one is not supported as well.
It is correct. And it's not technically defensible by the TRC. And they need improvement, and they do recommend that it be considered for some annex language, though.
Okay.
Kind of the same comments from the TRC as the previous one.
We have about 8 more CRs to get through. We're not going to get through all of them by the end of the day because of just the our timeline with everything. Any ones that we're not able to do today, we're not going to be able to review within the TRC. So they will be listed. This is just for everyone's knowledge. They will be listed as abstain and or something different if the CMAC would like us to list something different. And then in the notes, we'll state that we're not able to address during TRC meetings this year.
Nick, can we send those out to the TRC via email and have them do an email vote on them by the end of Thursday?
We can. These are all some though that these are all ones that we had looked at and did not think that it would be conducive to an email vote.
Well, it might be better than zero.
Than zero. We can. We can absolutely do that. And you know, maybe it's not a technical vote, but it's a.
My worry is that if we just list it as abstain, it won't pass. Because lots of times the CMAC membership likes to vote with the TRC. If they don't approve, they're not going to vote to approve. And I'd hate for that to happen just because we didn't have time to discuss it.
Yeah.
But if we send it out through an email, at least we'll have all time, each have had time to think about it and review it on our own.
Yeah, I could do that. I could get it in an email. It would all just need to be done by the end of the week. Or really by the end of the day tomorrow, so that everyone could get their reports in on Friday. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's fine. I can do that. Let's go to the next one. So I think all these others we might be able to kind of review in emails. I'm going to pull this one because I think this one probably require a little bit more discussion as soon as it comes up. Terry, if you're still on, this was one of yours. If you want to talk to this, this is probably going to be the last one that we'll be able to get to today. This is
good.
Yeah, using the light reflective value.
Yes. So let's see. Basically, the request in the CR is that we change the wording in the MAC from the Munsell
I think
color,
it's the Munsell.
Munsell color
Yeah.
to light reflective value. Because that's what the industry uses as a standard versus what we have in the text currently. There was no TSAC comment. There was no public comment on this one, but in the little bit of research that I could do on this, this is basically the light reflective value of the pool surface for tile, plaster, whatever, paint. And it is what the industry uses. I even found some documentation that ADA even recommends the 70% light reflective value versus the muslin color text. So to me, this was an easy one to say yes to based on that. I have a few documents. I can throw them up in the comments if you want to see that, some of the research, but I feel like this one was pretty straightforward.
Yeah, I like that. How did they land on the 70%? Is that a standard?
Mm-hmm. That is a standard. In signage and in the ADA, those were all things that were standard. Let's see if I can throw that up in the.
Because it looks like that effectively doubles the. It makes the available colors a lot lighter and a lot less if we go with the 70 value than what's currently the 6.5 Munsell value. Looks like that corresponds to like a 35 light reflective value. Am I reading this correctly?
Yes. And so basically it is when I read through it, and this link I put in the comments, this is how paint companies give their colors and how much light they reflect. So it is a very common use in the industry.
Which industry though? The paint industry or
paint
pool
and
industry?
plaster and let's see what else.
Because the Munsell color, it's been in there since the first edition.
Yeah.
I think this is the first time it's ever come up. So I'm curious to see if it's used industry wide. Who's using it? Why hasn't it mattered till now? And also too, it looks like they're comparable. So if you used one, it looks like there's a conversion to get to the other one.
Yes. So the light reflective value is what they are calling the industry's rule of thumb. They do use the Munsell scale. I mean, they are interchangeable.
Yeah, that's the way my brain was going. It's kind of like converting feet to meters.
Yeah.
I think my concern is that I'm not so much concerned as going to another measurement system. I think my concern more is that I'm not seeing. Oh, here we go. My concern is that it dramatically increases the. If you were looking at the Munsell scale, it would dramatically increase the number allowed, and then if we're looking at the light reflective value, it basically doubles the value that they would need to hit, and so it's going to really limit the number of color options, which is I don't know, that's a big deal, but it's just seems to me like a big change.
Yeah, I think if people are interested in using this, they can with that calculator you provided. It seems easy enough to convert Munsell over to the what are we calling it? light reflectance value.
Yeah, the light reflective value.
And then I think in the documentation, it's saying, someone is talking about, it says, in order to ensure there's an adequate color contrast between the lighted skin color and the full surface color must be at least 64% light reflective value, which is a Munsell 8.5. This is the required lightness from a theoretical point of view. And it says, I think. So it sounds like this is in the opinion of the submitter, not based on data.
That's kind of what I'm,
The values are based on data, but the analysis is based on the submitter's
Yes.
opinion.
that's kind of the feeling I'm getting as well.
Yeah,
This would fit in very well to the system that they use.
yeah.
They still can with the conversion calculator.
Yeah,
I could see this more as like revolutionary. I don't necessarily am against the concepts behind it. I think for me, I would want some data to back up why we're going with this 70% factor. You know what? Yeah. I see there is a lightest human skin color is 72%. Based off of a this would be a big change. Was there any TSC comments?
no, there were not. And there were no public comments either.
Yeah, the MAC currently says it needs to be at least 6.5. So if they want to have it be higher, like 8.67, for example, they can do that. That's still allowed. We just listed the minimum.
Carrie, do you have any thoughts on this?
I,
Not to put you on the spot. You can abstain if you want.
to be honest, there was a lot of science, and I tried to dig out as much as I could to see what the difference was. But I have to agree with the comment that, you know, we've listed the minimum and this is above the minimum. So it, you know, to say that these terms or these measurements are not the same, they're not equal. Yeah, I think what they've ended up proposing in the text change takes it too far, if that makes sense. I do think, you know, this language or this suggestion could be put into the annex, but
I think it could be good information for the annex. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's definitely interesting. I think we could work towards this in future editions. My personal opinion is that I think it's a little revolutionary right now as it's written.
yeah.
Any other comments from anyone? Anyone on the TRC that's on the call? Anyone that would support this this CR? Okay. Thank you all for your time today. I know it's a little frustrating when we can't have a quorum, but thank you all for attending and for your analysis. and for your all the time and effort that everyone's contributed to this process. We do have one more meeting tomorrow, same time. That will go through the final CRs that we have listed. We've got some biggies. We saved the best for last. Not the best, save the big ones for last. So there will be some really good discussion. I sent out the CR list for tomorrow to everybody. So please, if you're on the TRC, take some time to go through those CRs and just have an overall knowledge of them, because we're not going to have time to really debate all of them extensively. We're just not going to be able to get through everything. And then that will be the end of the TSC process for right now. There might be some more meetings in the future as we move between the vote on the code and the actual updates to the MAC. We'll keep everybody informed of those. But everyone that can potentially get to the meeting tomorrow, please do so. And then if you have any reports that are still hanging out there, please get those entered. We need those all in by 12:15. We'll say midnight, 11:59 on 12:15. I say end of the day, and I usually end up working into the night. So yeah, if everyone could get those in so I don't have to hunt you down next week, I would appreciate it.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks all.
Thanks.
Thank you all. Have a great day.